Okay, so that's a good word. The session is about using, well, two things essentially. It's about doing a new login screen experience and using LightDM for doing. So I'll start with a statement. I think Ubuntu needs a new login theme that matches Unity. So I don't know, does anyone disagree with that statement?
From a keyboard navigation point of view, GDM, yes. Getting around GDM is pretty
right. But there's also, so we both want it for look and feel, but there's also deficiencies in the current system that we want to address. Okay. So the next question then is, how do we do that? So I'm proposing that we use LightDM, which is a display manager I've been working on, to replace GDM and give us that flexibility to implement a new system. Obviously, the other choice is to keep using GDM. Do people have opinions either way?
Right. +1.
+1 for
Plus one removing GDM. Hey, Mark.
So, does anyone think at all we should stick with GDM?
I always
Yeah,
advocate
exactly.
for the underdog.
Okay, so it sounds like that's a pretty
If it was the old GDM, maybe, but no, not now.
Is everybody necessarily familiar with all the deficiencies that you know about? Is this room, are they well-known issues?
Well, I'm thinking I don't even have to go over them. If no one wants to stand up and say that GDM is great and we should keep it.
Yeah, I think
Well,
that's...
may ask the same question for LightDM.
Okay.
I mean, you might get a similar lack of responses.
Okay, so some of the issues I see with GDM, it's a very large, complicated project, and we see that in terms of things like code size. It's a 50,000 line C program. We see that in terms of the amount of patches that we're carrying and other distributions are carrying. So we're carrying 30-something patches, Debian's carrying a similar number. So the out-of-the-box experience is not working for people. And we see that in Launchpad, where we get tens of bugs a day on it. And for something that you see for such a short time in your day, it's you would expect people not to be thinking about it, but people are constantly reporting issues in it.
Pete, if you have a smart card, then you hook that up with PAM, and LightDM interacts with PAM in a very simple way. So if it works with GDM, it should work with LightDM just as well.
I don't remember if anybody's used LightDM. Yeah. Is this rather crashy right now?
Yeah, so it's still a work in progress. I say it's perhaps 80% there. So it needs work to get it over the line. I can do that work this cycle. So
How much time have you been allocated? All of
Robert
it?
is on LightDM this cycle.
so I've got a 6-month.
And going into the
If
future,
we do this, whatever time he needs.
going into the future, like
Yeah,
forever?
I understand that we would be taking this on, and we would be taking on another project. We are hoping that it gains some traction. We're gonna, someone could support it, but Robert or somebody would be supporting it.
The one big advantage I see in LightDM is it makes a very clear distinction between the GUI and the daemon, the lower part of it. And the reason for that is all projects can share the same display manager. So if you look at where GDM has come from, originally there was just XDM, and then everyone forked it to make a different version, but they only forked it to change the GUI. So all the lower layers are pretty much the same for everyone. So for LightDM to be a success, I expect to see, I want to see GNOME using it, I want to see KDE using it, I want to see XFC, I want to see LXD using it, with their own greeters on top.
we have another question on IRC. LightDM doesn't really work like that. You write front ends for LightDM, and one of the front ends that's been written is one that can read a GTK builder file already. So this is something like easy theming.
And there's also one that can display a full screen WebKit, so you could do an HTML.
Yeah, there's also WebKit.
But it's really, you're only limited by your imagination. If you can do it in X, you can do it in the green.
In theory,
But they're
could you
talking about easy themability, like
Yeah.
something that's accessible.
in theory, could you actually do a console, like a terminal login using LightDM?
It has to run next server at some point, so
Well,
You could do it.
just look like a terminal.
Yeah, I mean, you can, it looks exactly like a terminal.
No, I was literally thinking terminal, like seriously, like, I thought things were separated such that the X server was only needed for Wi-Fi.
Well, I mean, ultimately, you're going to load the X server
Right.
once you've logged in, so you might as well load it for the grid.
Yeah, fair enough.
You do have the ability to load it when you log in, right?
To load the X server.
Yeah, like load an X server for the login session.
It's the same one you use for the grid. So it's already there.
Do you have an ability to have it separate though?
They have two different ones. I'm thinking about it, particularly in terms of Wayland, because we can make LightDM support Wayland, so you could use your X greeter and then try out Wayland. So that's certainly a requirement.
Can you speak about what the uptake of LightDM or possible uptake of LightDM has been within other projects?
Right, so there's been a lot of interest from the smaller desktop environments. So Ubuntu expressed interest in using it for the next release, conditional on various things working. I think Ubuntu expressed interest at one point. There's definitely... Yeah. And
And you talked about TSP, right?
yeah, so I've talked with LTSP, I've been talking with Oracle. Basically everyone except for GNOME and KDE have sort of formally expressed interest in it.
And this cycle we have a design requirement to revisit the theme of the greeter, bring it into line with Unity, give it a facelift, and make it a slightly more pleasant experience and a more kind of consumer-focused experience. And if we're going to do that work, we need to make a decision on where we do that work.
Just for the record, I guess it's a bit of a foregone conclusion, but can you list, like, just quickly bullet point, like, some of the things that we're really gaining from LightDM that GDM made difficult or not possible?
Okay, so...
Yeah, maintainer.
Maintenance. It should be easier to maintain it. It's not. I mean, I've done something wrong. It should be a much simpler project to work on. We shouldn't need to carry a single patch on. Or maybe a tiny patch if there's something really bizarre we need. The division, there's a completely documented interface between the greeter and the daemon. So that basically means that things like what design wants to do can be done independently of what's going on in the display manager. We can share that between Ubuntu and Ubuntu, and that means that, you know, if we'll put 20% of a person on it, we're going to have more people maintaining it. You know, we have more people with knowledge of it. So instead of having, you know, someone who's working on KDM, someone who's working on LXDM, if we all end up using it, we're going to have more people with the knowledge.
How about like actual features, functionality?
So I'm just trying to think what GDM is efficient, and I mean, ultimately it should have pretty much the same features.
So it's really just a social and maintenance story.
And flexibility.
And a better foundation to work on.
But I guess that the foundation is the flexibility and the maintenance aspect.
And the flexibility thing you're talking about, like small code size, easy to change, well documented.
Well documented interface, yeah. Settlement, API guarantees, and all the rest of it.
Could we discuss the testing strategy for both existing display manager and the LightDM? The architecture of LightDM sounds like it might then help with a
Right.
simplified way of testing. But
Right.
clearly there's a lot of features here, a lot of requirements, there's a lot of different ways of
Yes.
interacting with this system.
So
within system place.
one thing I got working very early on is you should be able to work on LightDM without replacing the display manager, because you don't pull the carpet up. So there's a test mode which runs LightDM inside the Zephyr window, which is a X server inside the X server. So it's very easy for people to test, and they don't have to have system privileges or anything. I plan unit tests. I expect all the functionality to be unit tested inside it. High-level testing, I don't know, I guess that I'd leave it up to the LTSP, whatever comments I've got on the LTSP, the testing. Yeah.
For getting the greeter, what technologies do you depend on?
My guess is we'll go with the greeter that matches Unity. So we will have a Nux-based greeter.
What about, well, again, with the ability to fall back for those
Yeah,
who don't have the hardware.
and that would fall back to a Qt-based grid. So we would basically do the same thing we've done with Unity. Yeah.
But I mean, like, what is the core using? As
Oh, dependencies?
yeah, what technologies?
glib.
And that's it.
Pretty much it.
That's pretty light.
glib and xlib. Or XCB, one of the latest ones.
Cool. Issues like, what's your story for power management?
In the greeter?
While the session for LightDM is running. Do you plan to run a session?
No, so GDM currently runs a session. I think that's unnecessary. So I plan to avoid doing that. Obviously, power management is a requirement. We do have the option of running a session in the greeter, and if that's what we need to do, that's what we'll do.
Well, I think that's something that maybe we should talk about, or do you think that's better left that you decide later what the best technical choice is?
I think that's just a purely technical decision. In terms of requirements, we will have power management, end of story.
And accessibility.
And accessibility and all these,
Are there any other concerns about session or not?
not that I know, but feel free to raise.
So I guess since the grid is so separate, they'll be able to choose just how they save their configurations then.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll probably have a G settings
Yeah.
configuration for it, and that would integrate into the control center in some way.
As a general rule, how credible do you think it is for the greeter to like go mutilating GTK settings, for example, because you don't have an X settings manager?
It comes down to trying. You know, it really is a, just, is it going to be harder to do it again or to do it in the session? And that's the decision that'll be. The session it seems an unnecessary cost because we don't need 90% of what's in the session. We need a few small things that are pretty much system services.
If you look at upstream GDM, something I found out just last week, it actually ships a script to like turn off lots of stuff and like make it so that you can't accidentally open your music player by pressing the button on your keyboard. Like it has to go to explicit efforts to prevent these things. So from that standpoint, like +1.
For not using it.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
if you're pulling in stuff that might accidentally let you open a music player at the login
Yeah,
prompt,
exactly.
like something's not quite right.
Is it more work to take something that does everything and cut it down, or make something that does just what you want? And there's a security thing there.
I'm concerned about the feature parity of like your light power management versus a more comprehensive solution like GNOME power management.
Yeah.
I'll say that, but I think your approach is generally the right approach because, yeah, the security issue is just like some kind of a nightmare. Like you fail to notice, oh, I forgot to set this G settings key and now.
Or if GNOME updates something that adds a new feature and we don't
Yeah,
block that
exactly.
feature as it gets added, then all of a sudden you
It's
can do
like,
crazy things
yeah,
on your
it's totally a
display.
nightmare.
Robert, so there's two explicit patches that we carry in GDM that help us do a nice transition from Plymouth to blending of the background. We kind of talked about this a little bit. Should those be noted as features we need to address or just bugs that
Just bugs. So if you're doing something that's normal on current desktop systems, that should be in line. Ultimately, I expect it to be a plugin system, so there'll be a point where we'll go, is this something that everyone will use versus is this something that's going to be, is there a Plymouth plugin? If you use Plymouth, you go to Plymouth plugin and that does all that. So certainly for now, I'm putting stuff in that people use, and in the future we'll look at what side of the fence it should be. Yeah, contributors are welcome. It's all on Launchpad, it's GPL, patches, contributors, it's all.
No copyright assignment.
No copyright assignment.
Can you describe your development plans for the coming release and like when you expect to see this live in front of you?
Right, so it's currently in Universe. It's an old version. I have a PPA, so I would expect probably in a month I'd like to try and look at getting it done. I'd like to get it as early as possible.
All right, and will it be added in as the default, or will it be like an alternative that users flip some switch to move to it?
I don't know, what do you think, Seb?
Sorry, I was reading the white.
Do we put it in by default, or do we make it opt-in? No.
by default.
Yeah, you just go like straight away.
We don't want to run the switch in the LTS cycle. Better to get.
No, during the development cycle, do we just put it out there? And if you upgrade, you're now running.
Yeah, I think so.
You're now running LightDM. I mean, I'm up for that.
If you're on it full time, then like get ready for the fire hose friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the time you have it ready to move to main and everything, hopefully it's at least working for a few people. So yeah, just turn it on by default, and that way everybody immediately knows where they're at road.
Yeah.
So is the Greeter API close to being finalised, or is that yet to be sorted?
I would expect to finalise that with the Ubuntu release. So that would be GNOME 3.2. I'm running on the GNOME. Well, I plan to run on the GNOME for the 6 month release cycle, like a number of other projects. So I expect at that point I'll actually make some guarantees.
And have you actually officially pursued the inclusion for GNOME?
So
Yeah.
I did last cycle. I raised it. I then deferred it because we weren't going to do it in Ubuntu because of Unity. I wasn't going to have the time to work on it. I haven't done it this cycle, but I'm open to being.
Yes. Yes, please do.
Robert, if you include it in GNOME, does that get rid of the hooks of it being across?
Oh, sorry. It's a free desktop project.
Right,
So I would propose that GNOME would have as an external dependency with a GNOME module for the grid.
okay.
It's on freedesktop.org already.
Yeah. But would the code move to?
No. The core part of it lives on freedesktop.org. GNOME would have their greeter in GNOME Git if KDE wants to do the same.
That makes sense.
So there's a. So the way the architecture works is you've got the daemon, runs there and loads the X servers and maintains them. And you've got a helper library. There's a G object and a Qt one. And then your greeter links to that library. And that's how it talks to the daemon and does a bunch of useful greeter stuff. Like get the user list and do the power management.
So the upstream core has optional Qt dependency.
Yes. And there's a Qt greeter, example greeter in the source code. It does work.
Do you consider the dbus API public, or is it private and you use the library?
So it doesn't actually communicate using dbus between the greeter and the server. It uses the pipe.
Ah. So very private.
Very private. And I originally had it using dbus, but it was that same thing again. You went all the way to dbus and you kind of had to block it back. It seemed like more effort than it was worth. There is a dbus API for switching users and general stuff, and that's public.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
When's login and boot time? Have you measured that?
No. So I expect it to be faster. I don't know.
That would be faster than putting a whole session.
Exactly, that's fine. So, I mean, yeah, the greeter is you've only got 4 or 5 visual elements. It shouldn't take very long to load. It should be pretty snappy.
Some of these things that surely it's faster than are actually surprisingly wrong in some cases, because starting the full GNOME session at the login screen means you log in faster because everything's in the cache.
Right, I'm saying is someone measuring the entire...
Oh, someone needs to move it, yeah.
Okay.
We won't know until we build it.
Okay.
And I don't think it's not the primary reason to do it. So
Right. I'm just wondering,
We'll
if we
see.
have a few seconds,
But-
that'll be...
Yeah, but it's a good point. We regressed last cycle.
Yeah, login time.
We mentioned, I think we have a session later today on performance, but I don't remember where it is.
Tomorrow
But we
morning.
don't want to regress.
Yeah.
And our goal is not to regress, but,
I know it's
so parity would be great, better
so
would be, is the goal.
Yeah.
So the caching thing actually is not too true right now because GDM is running Metacity and OpenPanel and all of that, and then you log in. Once you log in, it's Compass and all that. So
Yeah, but like really a lot of the base libraries are the same.
yeah.
But you read ahead. It's going
Yes.
to cache all that anyway.
Yeah.
And you're going to run through all that initialization twice. You're going to contact the X server all round trips.
Yeah, I'm saying in principle, I'm just saying sometimes
Yeah.
you can be
Yeah.
surprised.
And that's why I don't want to promise it's going to be faster because we won't know till we do it.
Can we include, when you roll it out, can you also, somewhere in Wiki or something, provide steps for how people can work around if there are problems?
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, just running Xstart or
Yeah.
falling back to GDM or whatever.
Yeah. So one of the goals is it should fail gracefully. When GDM fails, it's often very hard to debug. LightDM has a quite extensive log, and I want to make sure if any part of it fails, the user is left with a screen that says something.
Question over here.
Yeah, so is there or will there be documentation of the main features?
Yeah. So
there is already or?
Is LightDM going to have its own user like GDM does now?
you know, it does. So the package in Ubuntu runs as the LightDM user.
Okay, right.
And how much of it is running? Like, is the core running, or
Core
just
runs
the
through.
and the
And
greeter runs?
runs as this unprivileged user.
It's probably pretty sane because it's the one that's pulling in all the heavy dependencies.
Yeah.
So you have really a small core plus glib as the only thing running as root. Have you like done any security auditing on the protocol that gets spoken over the pipe?
No, but the security team has expressed interest in reviewing it, so it will be audited. Documentation is a bit sparse, but it's the first step.
But it's maintained.
It's maintained.
It's like all the difference in the world.
So I guess I tried to sort of dump down all the requirements I've been picking up over time. I'm just wondering if, you know, it's pretty extensive. If there's anything that's missing, you know, let us know about it.
Or are there any features that are missing from GDM that people want, or any other specific requirements anyone wants to throw in?
This Fedora carries this patch against GDM I showed you that does this two-factor authentication with a nice UI.
Two factors on the list.
Right, but like get the UI integration looking nice so that it's not like enter 1 or 2.
Yeah. Is Pippa here?
Yeah.
Pippa's doing the design. So.
Oh, so you're designing the new, is there anything you can show us?
Have you looked at what Fedora is doing?
Oh, okay.
We're still starting next week.
Oh, so that'll be cool.
So yeah, I mean, anyone just obviously I'll start writing the design doc, and anyone feel free to ping me and I'll share it.
Pippa?
And what
Have
specific?
you looked at what Fedora is doing for the
What are you saying?
Fedora? They have a login screen that does something more than, I think Robert's even confused about how it works, but they have like an ability to select with buttons between whether you log in with a password or the two-factor way. Could be worth seeing what they...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I certainly did a whole load of looking at what everyone else is doing and what we do for businesses and single users and everything. But yeah, any ideas, obviously, anyone ping me and I can start showing them and that's great.
Yeah, it's really useful if anyone's got any requirements, and even better if they're practical examples of ideas people would, you know, are interested in or would like to see. If they send them over to Pippa, with links and with as much detail as possible. And now's really the time to get all that in, because next week Pippa's going to be capturing and collating all these requirements. So yeah, anything that anyone wants to see, please send it over.
So yeah, any complaints or anything about what's existing now in logins and things you want fixing, just let me know, and I'll try and obviously put in as much as humanly possible to make it nicer.
Matt from design team, will you be the login screen again? Does anyone know about that? Matt? Yes. Can I have a login screen demo? Face browser, face.
What?
Okay.
Yeah, we're here.
I guess this is not so much something that's probably, I'm just wondering, you know, when you log out to go to another user, is it the display manager that makes the screen, you know, flicker and turn, or is it?
That's outside of the controls.
Okay.
Yeah, so this won't be changing the boot time, the Plymouth stuff. This is just that middle chunk, so particularly the GUI part. There is ongoing stuff for the rest of it. That's much harder.
Yeah.
Is an out-of-band request Can I really encourage you to try very strongly to pursue this with the GNOME community and push really hard to convince them that this is the right way to go? Not just like proposal and then like silence.
Oh, I'll push it. Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, you want to help with that?
Yes, and yes, I have been.
All right, cool. Just add to it, so.
All right. How fast?
So OMG says we're already gonna replace it, so.
So it's official.
It's gotta be true.
Yeah, so.
We evaluated LightDM last release for Ubuntu.
Yeah.
And we ran out of time, frankly.
Yeah.
We got working in half of our machines.
Yep.
And the machines it works in is fantastic.
Right.
But we ran into problems on the upgrades. An upgraded machine wouldn't let us log into it for some reason.
So it's just missing 20%, you haven't figured out yet?
Yeah.
And yeah, that was one of the things that,
Yeah.
but
I wish I had more time to work on it. So it was just
exactly.
bits and pieces in my spare time.
But
Now,
we ran out of time, and we're looking real strong at putting it in this release because GDM is a nightmare, frankly, outside of GNOME.
yeah.
Well,
In terms of,
even within, you know.
But it, without,
in terms of
it's just a pain
accessibility,
for us to use. Like DM, all we gotta do is install it and it ran.
Cool.
in terms of accessibility, I'm sort of happy to look at what GDM does now and work with the guys in the community to see if we can do the same or something better. I'm not so much thinking of how to enable screen mirror stuff. I'm thinking of users who, like pointer users who need to use mouse gestures and the like.
Yeah. Yeah, so accessibility reviews early and often, that'd be great.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to take time to get it all in there, but
Yeah.
if we just know what the issues are as soon as possible, we can look at it. As the list is so long, I think we're not going to get all the features in, so it's going to come down to priorities.
Yeah.
And people have particular features they want. Please step up and implement it.
Certainly we should set a good, a good baseline for accessibility.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, absolute requirements are, it's got to be accessible, it's got to work, it's secure, it's got to look pretty good.
Just under the authentication section, it's got key card, can we just make sure we've got smart card in there as well, because there
Oh,
are different
is there a
connotations, depending on who you're talking to.
And I remember trying to get my fingerprint reader thing working, and that was just generally painful. Is that?
It depends, it might be a ham issue, it might be,
Okay.
we'll just have to see how we go.
Okay.
Does this mean we're not getting facial recognition in the first release?
Well, we look at
No, we're not, unless you want to implement.
Yeah, low priority. As well. Yeah, that's just
Like, in terms of all these systems, we'll probably do, the goal will be as good as G, so not very good. But hopefully, if we can, we'll get two-factor working rules. But I'm not going to promise something like that.
So what are we talking about?
I think we're done.
We're just doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. We should have delayed one more.
Who's likely to be doing the Knux-based reader? Someone on DX?
Sorry, what?
Is someone, what or person on DX doing the Knux-based reader?
I'll be implementing the grid.
Okay.
Cute front end and what so well.
So,
Nothing but
Nothing.
I don't really.
as far as the Wayland bit, you plan on looking at that on the website at all?
I'd love to play around with it. I'm not going to make any promises for that.
Okay.
Keep talking.
Robert, how do I debug it if it's not showing anything?
Look at log, if you look at the package.